Hey guys, LevelCap here, and Modern Warfare Season 3 update is live. It adds 4-player squads to Warzone, 3 new maps, new milsim skins for the default operators, it fixed a bunch of bugs, and more. I'll be covering everything in this video, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you like these kinds of updates. First things first, let's take a look at the actual patch notes. Airplane audio at the start of a Warzone match has been reduced so you won't go deaf before dropping in. The volume of distant or occluded weapons has been reduced. This is a pretty significant improvement, as now gunfire sounds like it's actually far away versus how it used to sound right next to you even when the shooter was 300 meters away. They also fixed an issue with some footstep audio not being audible for ADS and crouched walking. Aside from audio, of course, there's a bunch of gameplay updates to Warzone. Firstly, all the ground loot has been reworked. You'll be finding some new weapons as well as new blueprints on existing weapons. The price of loadout drops has been further increased from 8,500 to 10,000. This increase is universal across all modes and makes a lot of sense for quads, but I'd like to see the devs implement different pricing for solos. It's one thing to have 4 players constantly building up a big bank collective among themselves, but for an individual player, you're better off going for the loadout drops that spawn over time. Part of Warzone's appeal is not having to worry about what weapons you loot because you can just buy your own custom loadout. The more expensive the loadout drops get, the more important the weapons you loot become. In our final bit of patch notes coverage, the issue preventing players from using armor plates and kill streaks has been fixed. I've actually had this happen quite a few times recently, so it's great to see the issue is resolved. Now there's also a bunch of other bug fixes and minor weapon balance changes in the patch notes. You can check the link in the video description for a full list. Now what about the new content? Well, it wouldn't be a season update without a new reason to use Yegor. Everyone's favorite Ukrainian operator is now sporting a classic Tiger King look. In all seriousness though, there are a ton of new operator skins to unlock by completing challenges and leveling up the battle pass. The default operators now have a bunch of authentic looking cosmetics that represent police and soldiers from various countries. If you're looking for a more grounded and realistic look, these are your best bet. The character Alex from Modern Warfare's campaign has also been added as an operator. Season 3 introduces vehicle skins. You can unlock these via the Battle Pass and by completing challenges like most other cosmetics. The Battle Pass itself costs the usual 1,000 COD points, and you can also buy a bundle that includes 20 levels for 2,400 points. The bundle also unlocks the Renetti pistol. The second new weapon, the SKS, is another 11 levels away. Both weapons can be unlocked without purchasing the Battle Pass as part of the free tier rewards. I'll probably be doing a weapon guide or loadout video for these guns, but the brief overview is the SKS is a better EBR and the Renetti is a reliable pistol. If you like using marksman rifles, the SKS is probably the new go-to option. As for maps, Backlot from Call of Duty 4 returns. Ania Palace has been shrunken down to a standard size map. And finally, there's Hovick Sawmill. The last map was thought to be a remake of the Modern Warfare 3 map Village, but it turns out to be more or less a new map. Bringing back classic maps from Call of Duty's past gets the nostalgia juices flowing, but it's a mixed bag when it comes to how they actually play in Modern Warfare. Players move faster, the weapons are more lethal, there's more kill streaks, and a bunch of other tweaks to the gameplay that really fundamentally change the flow and feel of the older maps. Crash and Vacant both feel claustrophobic and chaotic compared to how they originally felt. Backlot was a standout map in Call of Duty 4, so it returns, and with the gameplay differences aside, it is a welcome addition to the game. The more open layout and minimal interior areas encourage people to run around the map, but the usual camping spots like the construction area and perimeter buildings are already seeing a ton of activity. Expect to die a lot from people sitting in these areas. Interestingly though, the map isn't just a one-to-one remake. The spawn areas for both teams have been greatly expanded to create more space. There's also a lot of new buildings and cover that ups the complexity of the map while still staying true to its original design. It's more of an overhaul than with the other classic maps, but it is still a classic map. The thing that stands out the most about Backlot is just how good it looks. Modern Warfare's maps have been mostly either modern-looking industrial areas or rural villages. Backlot, being a Middle Eastern town with a war-torn aesthetic, gives it a look and feel that stands out from the crowd. Overall, Backlot is a solid addition to Modern Warfare's roster. The game's standard map design is somewhat divisive for players, and it's nice to have some of the classic maps returning, but they tend to highlight the differences between Modern Warfare and the classic Call of Duty games more than they showcase their similarities. Backlot plays well, and it's nice to have it back, just expect a bit more chaos than before. Ania Incursion is a variant of Ania Palace, which is the game's smallest ground war map. It sticks players in the central palace area and some of the surrounding courtyard. Ania hasn't been my favorite map to play in ground war, and this version of it doesn't do much to address its issues. The palace is kind of a cluster of sneaky spots and angles, so if both teams end up fighting in it, things get very messy. The courtyard area and general perimeter of the map are also fairly open and surrounded by buildings rife with campers. I wouldn't call Ania Incursion a bad map. It's an improvement in some ways to the larger version, but it's certainly not Backlot. And finally, we have Hovick Sawmill. Now, I saved talking about this map for last because I think it's going to be the most divisive. Like I said earlier, data mining suggested that this map was a remake of Village from Modern Warfare 3. And while that's not really the case, it still features a somewhat similar overall design. Most of the map is a series of streets and small buildings that are pretty open. There are, however, a bunch of choke points and alternative routes you can take to avoid them. The interiors are pretty sparse and simple in layout, so don't expect a ton of fighting inside. That said, some nasty windows and overwatch spots give snipers and campers control of long sight lines. The good news is it's easy to avoid those sight lines and the buildings aren't that hard to flank. Just watch out for the claymores. Overall, it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to the new maps. It seems like Modern Warfare players want more maps like Shoot House and less like Ania Incursion. All of the new maps are relatively large and open. They're all pretty solid, but they're not the tight-knit, action-packed maps I think most people are expecting. Backlot is probably the highlight purely for the nostalgia value, but I'd say Hovick is a pretty solid addition to the game in terms of its overall gameplay. Alright, it's time to get into the actual changes made to Warzone. 4-man squads are now available. Right off the bat, it's safe to say that this changes up the meta a lot. Instead of intimate 3-man squads, Warzone feels more like a big brawl or party mode with 4 players in each squad. Gunfights are more chaotic, but you also have more backup going into them. And having 3 other players to pool your money with makes that 10,000 loadout drop way more accessible. And while I wouldn't say there's more loot, the variety of weapons and their attachments has been mixed up. However, even when adding 4 players, Warzone still feels like Warzone. It just feels faster and more action-packed now. The nice things about quads is just having a room for that 4th player. I play mostly with people I know, so having room for one more person makes playing with friends a lot easier. I like the more close-knit feel of trios, but it does kind of feel like Warzone was built for quads. With only 38 squads running around versus the 50 you have in trios, the combat in quads ends up being a bit more clustered. Despite having an extra player in every squad, it doesn't feel like the map got smaller or anything like that. Now, what I'm really interested to see is how the 200 player mode ends up handling. Warzone's map is enormous. While matches tend to have a decent pace if you chase down other players constantly, the mid-game can kind of feel drawn out. And I think adding a 200 player mode with quads could find an interesting sweet spot for the overall pacing of a match. As for the new weapons and variants, it'll take a couple of days to figure out what the latest and greatest weapons are. Warzone is more about getting the loadout drop for me, so I don't tend to focus too much on looting. As long as I have an assault rifle and sniper, I'm generally pretty happy. Of course, there's also a few stealth tweaks that aren't listed in the patch notes. Probably the biggest one is High Alert now highlights the direction of players aiming at you. Before, it only used to flash your entire screen. Now you get a decent sense of the enemy's direction. You can also clear the green square notification from weapon attachments as well, so no more hunting down the 7 different random attachments you've unlocked to remove the notification. Now, I'm sure there'll be more stealth weapon changes and balance tweaks that are uncovered by players in the next few days. If anything major comes up, I'll include its details in a future video. Later in the season, it looks like we're getting a new LMG and something called Gunsmith Customs. I'm not sure if this is just new blueprint or enhanced weapon customization. Either way, it looks like there might be some new bling to look forward to. We're also getting 2 new operators, and Hard Hat from Modern Warfare 3 is returning as a standard map. Overall, the Season 3 update is pretty solid, if a bit light on exciting content. The big disappointment for me is the lack of exciting new weapons. I'd really like to see some new snipers or something that isn't just more of the same like the SKS. Overall though, I think you'll be pretty happy with the update, and that pretty much about covers everything new in Season 3. If there's anything that stood out to you, leave it in a comment down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.